last video tutorial in the Basics of Colouring series, and we're going to be doing a project together. I've printed the image a very large size, which is obviously much too big for a card, but if I made it any smaller you wouldn't be able to see as well as I colour along. I've also printed out one of the colour guides just to give me an idea of what colours I'll be using, and over at the side here I have a coloured version of the image from the digital set as well, and that'll just help me in the placement of my colours. Now I've put all my markers already out, so I've selected all of those, and I also have my pencils, so they're ready for me to use as I want them. Now if you haven't already printed out your image, go ahead and do that if you want to colour along with me. Otherwise you can follow along and watch the video and then come back and do that later. It's up to you where you start colouring. A lot of people start with the focal image, which in this case would be the little bird. I tend to look for things that are kind of structural throughout the whole image, so something that ties everything together. In this case, for me, that would be the branch. So I'm going to start there with the branch, and I'm going to start with the E84, which is the lightest of the kind of, it's a greeny brown. So I'm going to just start by colouring along my branch, and I find that that just gives me something to work from. So I like to have a base somewhere that I can sort of come off for each of the other elements. So with the branch, all the leaves and gum nuts are attached, and of course the little bird is sitting on top of that branch. So just colour along with the shape of the branch. Remember that we're going to be using all of those things that we spoke about in the earlier videos. It's all about push and pull of colour and the shaping of your colouring, so the texture, things like that. So as you can see, I'm just bringing my brush along those branches right down through the center of the leaves. So you can see that I've done that one here. Do that for all of them. Now because this is the lightest of the E's, the E colors, I will be able to add color over the top. The alcohol markers are translucent, so you can see through them. So I will be able to change those colors as we work. I'm just taking them into the top of the gum nut. I'm not going to colour in too much of the gum nut. I will bring that colour a little bit further as we go along, but remember we're going to be colouring in lots and lots of layers. So it's all about layering those colours to get that wonderful depth of colour and add that dimension to your image. Alright, so that's the base colour. Now don't be tempted just to leave it like that with the one solid colour, because once you've got everything else coloured in, it will become very obvious if you haven't added a few more colours to that branch. It will be very flat. So as I've mentioned in other videos before, I switch now to my darkest colour, which in this case is going to be the E89, and I'll put in the real deep shadows, the parts of the image that I want to push back. So some of these branches are in behind other branches, and that's where it helps to have the little digital. You can even just print out the black and white or the line drawing, and it will help you just to see where those branches, which ones are behind, which ones are in front, to help you add in that push and pull of colour. So this one here is in behind, so I'm just going to add that really dark colour. Now remember, we're going to blend these out, so it's not going to stay as dark as this, but I'm still following the lines or the shape of the object, referring back to my little sheet and figuring out where everything is positioned. So with these gum nuts, the ones that are behind the main branch, I'm just going to add in that darkness, and what that does is pushes these sections backward. That's that push and pull of colour, and it's going to push those behind and let the other branches come forward. So now you can see that this branch here is the one that's in front. It comes forward, and all we've done is just added that darkness to indicate that those other branches that are coming off are behind. So go through and add just a little bit of colour, a little bit of darkness, anywhere where the branches are pushing backward. So I'll do that now. This is my E89, so I'll go through and I'll do that to each of those branches. Alright, the other thing we want to do is to add a little bit of darkness wherever the branches meet. So even though one might not be behind the other, such as just here in this intersection, it would be quite dark where the two branches meet. So we can add a little bit of darkness there, and that's going to help to shape that branch. So anywhere also where it goes behind another object, so for instance our little bird, we're going to add some of that dark E89 as well, and that will push the branch backwards behind our little bird. So don't forget to do under his feet as well. Just take care there because it's very small. But remember that we're going to be layering that colour pencil or some pen over the top. So even if you do lose the little feet, we can bring them back with the coloured pencil, which will sit over the top. You'll remember that it'll sit over the top of that marker. You can also add a little bit of darkness underneath the branch. So anywhere along the bottom of the branch. And again, that's about that shaping. And we want to get that variation of colour as well. So branches, particularly gums, this is a eucalyptus, a gum tree, they have lots of different colours in them. You can get gum trees that have pink and red and green and blue even. So whatever you want, whatever species of gum you're doing, that's fine. Add as much colour as you like in sort of the areas that you want to add it. So remembering that push and pull of colour as you're adding your colours, the darker colours. All right, so we're just working our way through. Have a look around the image. Decide where it would be nice and shadowy and dark. And then, of course, the next step after that is to blend. So we're going to blend in with a lighter E shade, which in my case will be the E87. And all I'm going to do is work that over the top. So between those two colours. Just to cause them to blend together. Now remember, there's no right and wrong for this. It's just what you think looks nice. And what you think helps to shape that branch. So go through and add your other colour. And then we're going to come back in with a lighter one. And now we're coming back through with that lighter E84. And we're just going to blend right again all the way over the branch, over both those previous colours, to bring everything together. Don't overwork it, as we discussed. We don't want to end up with a mottled look, but we do want to blend them together. So bring it back over the other colours, right around the branch. All right, so they're all done. All the branches are done, and that gives me just that base that I was talking about, that framework to work from. So what I'm going to do now is turn my attention to the leaves, and they're going to be done also in in a YG series. So I've got the YG 93, 95, 97, and 99. But I will incorporate other colours. So I will still be using the E's in there. There'll be some greys, and later on I'll even bring in some of the blues that you'll see in the bird. And that's just a way that you can tie everything together and get that really coordinated picture. So I'm going to start again with the lightest of the YGs, which is my YG 93. And I'm going to stroke in the colour on the leaf, remembering again that shape. So eucalyptus leaves are long, so our strokes are going to go down the leaf, following the shape of that leaf. So flex the tip of your marker as you're colouring all the way down the length of that eucalyptus leaf. Now we want to remember we're using those lights and darks to shape our leaves. So we don't want this just to look like a flat leaf. We want it to have some shape in it. We want the bends and all that sort of thing to actually have shape. You can colour over the top of that previous marker if you want to. And if you notice that it's sort of blending a little bit, you can add that in again later. So don't forget, it's all about layering. You can layer and layer until you're quite content. All right, so I've stroked in that YG 93. Now I'm going to come up with the 90, I might start with the 97, which is not quite the darkest, but what I want to do is, with this leaf here, this curve here, I want that to look like it's an inward curve, so that the leaf is higher here and higher down there, and it's curving away. You might want to do that the other way. You might want to make this look like it's coming out towards you, but I want to make it so that it's curving inward. And if you'll remember our previous videos, that comes back again to that push and pull of color. So I'm adding my darkest green here. Well, not the darkest one I've got. This is the YG 97. but I'm going to add a lot of darkness just here to the leaf with those strokes that are ending in those little points, so the flicking motion. And what that's going to do is push that leaf, or push that section of the leaf away with that darkness. I'm going to bring in just a little bit of the YG99, which is darker again. And that's going to push that section of the leaf back even further. Now I want this to be quite smooth, so I want a smooth transition between these colours. So I'm going to work that blend where those two colours meet. I don't want a sudden step because I don't want it to look like an edge. I want it to look like the leaf is curved. So I'm working those two colour transitions together so that you can't really see a hard edge. Now coming down to my YG95. And I'm going to go over the blend again, just on the edge, and I'm going to bring it further, and we're coming up into the light. So we're making that look like it's curving away from us to get a bit of a bend in that leaf. So again, with those strokes that end in a point, the flicking motion of the pen, getting in that texture. Now I'm going to add a little bit more darkness just here at the end, not overly dark, but again this is just with the YG95 so that it looks like it has another little bend, not as large as this one, but just another little bend here. And then I'm going to come back to my YG93, which is the lightest one, and I'm going to flick that colour over that darker one. I'm not going to work all the way back into this base layer though, because that will just make it darker. We'll be adding another layer of colour if we do that. So all I'm just doing is smoothing that blend and shaping that leaf. Now leaving the texture, or some of the texture. You don't want to get rid of all that texture. And then we have a nice leaf that looks like it's curling away from us. Now again, you can come back in with your E colours to do that vein down the middle. So this is the E84 again. This was the lighter of the colours. Now you can bring that all the way back in, and you can even apply it to some of the other areas of the eucalyptus leaf because they are very colourful leaves. So I'm going to bring this right to the end, and I'm actually going to add it to the tip of the leaf. So I'm going to flick upward with that E84, and then I'm going to bring in some darker colours again, and also add a little bit of darkness to the end. All right. And again, once we get to the pencil stage, I'll be adding a little bit of other colours on top of that to really blend it in nicely, to coordinate it nicely with the rest of my picture, and to add a bit of interest. So now I'm going to work on, let's work on this leaf behind. This time I'm going to make this section here nice and light. This is what's going to be closest to the viewer. I want that to look like it's curving outward, and this is curving inward, but I need to take notice here of this stack of gum nuts that's growing just in front. So this is going to be a little bit darker because we want that to push into the background, and we want those gum nuts to come forward. So I'm still going to start with my lightest, which is the YG93, and I'm going to stroke in those lines of colour. Remember, following the shape of the object. So we're going to work down the leaf, flexing the tip of your marker. Now here on the leaf there's this rough section. That's where some sort of creature has come and had a little bit of lunch. And usually around those gum nuts where something's had a chew is a dead spot. So you can add in a little bit of the brown or the E colours if you want to. So bring that colour right down to the very tip, and then come around this gum nut. Alright, now we're going to bring in our darkest, which is the YG99, and I'm going to apply this here in behind this gum nut. And that's again so that we can push that area back, and that will automatically bring the gum nut forward because it will be lighter. I'm just going to colour in around there. I don't necessarily want this to be an area that's curved away, but it doesn't matter if it does. So we'll bring in that darker colour just to push that part of the leaf into the background. You don't need that to go all the way to the other edge because, as I said, it's not really a curve away. It's more about that push and pull of colour. So pushing that into the background behind that gum nut. But we will have that nice smooth transition anyway. And we'll keep it quite dark here at the top of the leaf. Now, remember I said I do want to keep this section here quite forward, quite high, so that's going to be the lightest section. So I'm going to make sure I bring this YG95 all the way to either side of this section here. You can see that that leaf is really quite dark because we had the base around this gum nut of that darkest YG colour. And then we're going to flick in some of the YG95 from the bottom as well. And what that's going to do is push the bottom section of the leaf backward and make this part here look like it's coming forward. Okay, so this is that lightest YG. This is the YG93. And we're just doing that to blend those two colours together. It's nice and even. Little flicking strokes, lots of texture. And there we have it. So you can see how we use that push and pull of colour to shape those leaves and also to push this section backwards. So now what I'm going to do is just colour through each of my leaves in that same manner, and that will be my first layer on the leaves. So I'll do that and then we'll come back and we'll add some of the detail into each of those leaves. I'm finishing the blend on my last leaf. So I've gone through and I've done all the other ones. And what I'm going to do now, after I finish this one, is to add in some detail. So I'm going to use my markers, both the YG markers and the E markers, to add a few details to each of the leaves. Eucalyptus leaves have lots of marks and colours in them that make them really interesting. Now you don't have to do that. You don't have to add the extra details if you don't want to. If you like the leaves the way that they are, that's fine. Just adding in these few bits and pieces with the markers you've already used just gives it a little bit more realism. So you can add in some little dots here and there on the leaves where creatures might have come along and stung the leaf or laid eggs or whatever. And I mentioned before around these chewed up parts, there's a couple of them on the leaves. You can add a little bit of the E marker so that it looks like around that leaf has been chewed by something. You can blend that in, add a few dots, things like that. We can make this even more obvious if we come in with the pencils later, so we might add a little bit more detail a little bit later on with the pencils, because as you know, as we've discussed, the pencils will sit on top of the marker and they'll be a little bit more obvious. But you can do that all around your image, so what you've already coloured, if you want to. And again, you can come back in where those branches come down to form the vein of the branch. If you've lost those, you can bring them back in with your markers. Don't make them too stark. You can do that again later with the pencils if you want to. So you don't want them to be really obvious, because in some eucalyptus or gum leaves they are obvious. They're a different colour oftentimes. That's fine. So just get them the way you want them. So have a look around your leaves where you think they might need a little bit more colour or a little bit of detail. Add those things in now with your markers. Remembering that we will come back with our pencils so that you don't have to recolour the whole thing, and you don't have to add in everything, because sometimes that's going to get lost anyway, and that's the translucent nature of these alcohol markers. So they kind of are see-through. You'll be able to see through one layer to the next. All right, so I'm just going to work my way around adding a few little details here and there. There we are. I've added some details on most of my leaves. It's easy to get carried away because it's quite fun to do. But just have a play anywhere that looks a little bit plain. So for instance, this leaf up here looks a little bit plain to me. So I might come in and add just a little bit of additional detail that I was talking about. You can see all the spots and things that I've added. Tip of your pen, remember this goes back to that marker control, and that's stippling. Just stipple in a few random dots of different sizes. You can even make a broken line. So start it up here at the top of the branch where it joins the vein of the leaf. So I've just gone along the edge a little bit, but I'm also going to come along in the same place along the edge of the leaf, and I'm going to break that line up into little dots and add a few other bits and pieces. Just adds a little bit of extra interest. So I'm going to do it again down here, and then a few extra dots. Same with the vein, so just darken that vein a little bit, and then up beside it. So it just adds a few extra little details and interest to your picture. So now we're ready to move on and to get these gum nuts coloured. So let's do that next. So my gum nuts are going to be a base of E84, which was the same base we used for our branch. I'm going to start with this one here in the front. So I'm just going to base that in. Now the gum nuts have in this case, these ones done flowering, so they've finished their flowering, and now it's just the hard outer shell that's left. So this central part here will be very dark because that's inside the gum nut. So just colour in the whole shape. And the gum nuts are spherical, so we're going to, this you might remember back to when we were colouring, or when we were talking about light and dark on those flat circles. So we're going to leave the nice light part at the top here. We're going to make sure that this inside section here is very dark. So that's inside the gum nut. And we'll probably end up darkening this even with some pencils as we go along. So that's inside the gum nut. Now don't worry that it looks like you're losing all the detail. That will come in again when we add our pencils, but it is difficult to keep that detail with your markers. So we're just shaping this gum nut. So remembering that we want it to look like a ball or a sphere. So the sides are going to be curving away. That's where we're going to be darkest. Now I'm not working with my darkest pen yet. I'm just laying in some of the second darkest one, which is the E84. And I'm leaving that lighter area toward the top, and now I'm going to bring in my E89, which is the really dark one. So a little bit around, there's a bit of a lip on these gum nuts. Now I don't want to bring in too much of this because this gum nut here can't be ultra dark because of the ones behind it. Remember, we don't want this one to be the darkest one. We want this one to kind of sit on top, but we still need to shape it with our colours. Turning my work, you can see I'm turning it, make it a little easier to colour. And now what I'm going to do is blend that out. So this is the E87. Now you can see how I've created that lip just by leaving that area in the lightest colour. And that's again the push and pull, so that dark area looks like it's receding while the light area looks like it's coming forward. Blending nice and smoothly. Try not to go over that lightest area too much. So this part here, even though it's the same color as the one I'm using now, by adding more of the same color, you're still creating those layers. So I'm going to try and avoid that area and leave that as light as possible, so it gives that kind of spherical shape. With this central part here where the gum nut's going on the inside, this bottom part, I want that to be a nice smooth blend, which it is, but I want the top part to be a sudden transition because we're looking at the lip here and there's a sudden transition into the darkness up here, whereas this is basically looking along the back of that gum nut. So we're going to make that look more sudden, more like a step, a drop, which is what it is, straight into that gum nut. So you can see just by creating that difference. So I've got the very lightest of the E's and the very darkest of the E's laid side by side. Not a smooth transition, not a smooth blend between those two just at that area there. And that gives that kind of idea that you're looking into the gum nut. So you see that just there? Gives that sudden change in colour is what you're looking for. Okay, so let's get on to the ones that are in the background now. Again with the E84. Now we don't have a lot of colours. I've only been using 3 of these E's. So transitioning between the colours is going to be a little tricky with just the 3. But don't worry about that. We will bring some darkness in and lightness in with our pencils later on. So if it looks like you're losing your gum nuts, don't worry too much because we can add some colours over the top. Right, so this is just the base of the E84. I'm going to colour it in the same way. This one doesn't actually have an opening, a visible opening. The opening's sort of underneath. So I'm just going to shape it with the markers that I have. This is the E87. So we're shaping that gum nut. This is a rounded section here at the sides. And then the bulb, I guess, of the gum nut. So we're going to colour all the way around the outside of that gum nut, and this is where it joins on. Just here is where it joins on to the branch. So I'm going to leave that light for the moment. I'm just going to bring in my darker colour. Now I want it to be darker here behind this gum nut so that it pushes it backwards. Those flicking strokes in the shape of the gum nut, that will help to give the impression of a rounded gum nut. Right, so I've got that colour in. Now I'm going to go with my darkest, which is the E89. That's the bottom. And the sides of that little sort of protuberance. And then we're going to go up the sides a little way. I'm not going to take it all the way around the top just here, but I am going to bring it all the way back around behind that second gum nut, or that first gum nut that's in front. So I'm going to bring that darkness all the way back up here. Flick it in with those little strokes. Flick it in around where the gum nut meets the branch. And then maybe I've got a little bit higher on this side. And then we're going to blend. So blend that darker colour. Again with those little flicking strokes, following the shape of the gum nut. Right, so that's our second gum nut coloured. Now you can see that there's a big transition here between the top of the gum nut and the branch that it's joining on. I'm going to leave that like that. I quite like that. It just gives you the idea that we're looking at something different there. So you can see it's actually joined on there. All right, so now what I'm going to do is go through and colour all those gum nuts in the same way using those 3E colours. Again, if you lose one of the gum nuts, don't worry, we can bring it back in later with some of our pencil. All right, so we're finishing off that last gum nut. Now, as you can see, they have lost a little bit of their detail, which is what happens when you're using markers, especially in small spaces. But as I've said, we can bring that back in with the pencil a little bit later on. So we can now do what we did before with the gum leaves, and that's add a few little spots and specks to our gum nuts, and use the same colours. So use the colours you coloured them with. I'm choosing the E89. All I'm going to do is put in a few little dots and things here and there on the gum nuts. You don't have to put them anywhere in particular, or on, you know, at the sides or at the tops or wherever, and you don't have to put them on all of them if you don't want to. You can use the lighter colour or the darker colour. Obviously the lighter colour isn't going to show up too well against the darker parts of the gum nuts, but you will be able to see a slight texture. Again, that's because they're so translucent. So feel free to add a few dots even onto those darker areas of your gum nut. You will see the texture a little bit, and this is done by being up at the top on that tip of your marker, and that's that marker control again. All right, so we've got all the little specks and things in on our gum nuts as well as our leaves. That's pretty much it for the markers section of our foliage. Now what we can do is move on to our little bird. Now this is where I found it particularly important to have a reference guide, because the bird that I've chosen is a superb fairy wren, so it is a particular colour combination. You can look these up on the internet. They're all over the place. Even in the digital set, you can just download the watermark set just to get the idea of where those colours go. We're going to lay down those base colours with our markers, so I have them all chosen here. I'm also going to use some cool greys, so the sea greys, and they're on his belly, for instance. I'm going to use the cool greys for that, and the rest of the hood and things like that are going to be the dark blues and things like that. All right, so I'm going to start with the C1, and I'm going to apply this to his wing. So you can see here there's a little bit of fluff around his tail, the wing and the belly. So that's where I'm going to put the C1 to start. So just move that to the side. I can see it over there if I need to refer to it, but I'm just going to add that C1. Again, turning my work as I go, following the shape of the bird. So his feathers would be coming down like this along his belly. So I'm always going to follow the shape of the image. So colouring that entire area, and I'm also going to colour the wing. So we can layer those colours up over the top, but starting with the coolest, beg your pardon, starting with the lightest colour so that we can build those up. Now the belly is a lot lighter than the wings. We're just colouring that fluff around his tail. And that wing does have a little bit of warmth in it, so we might switch to a warmer grey to finish the wing. But for his belly, I'm going to bring in the C3, so this is the darkest of the greys that I'm using. And this is going to go just here at the back of his body and under his wing and under his belly. So this is helping to shape the bird. And I'm going to do this in little flicks with my marker. So the little flicks that I was showing you in one of the previous videos, and that's going to give that texture to the bird. So the bird obviously is covered in feathers, and those feathers are nice and textured, and that will give that idea of texture. So I'm going to bring in now the C2 for a bit of blending. Now I'm not expecting this to be a really, really smooth blend, because as I just said, we want those feathers. And we're going to take that right around the bird, flicking as we go, just to build up that texture. All right, and then come back in with the C1 just to finish that texture and to blend those colours around his tummy. Now if you want to, you can come back with the C3, so that darker one, and flick in some colours here and there. Remember, I was mentioning before that as you layer the colours one over the other, it does get darker as well. Alright, so we're just flicking in a little bit of the C3 here and there to get a little bit of texture. Okay, let me just put that up a bit higher, and you can just see some of the texture. When we add a little bit of colour pencil, that will be even more obvious. Now I'm going to do the wing next. Now the wing, as I mentioned, I did give it the base of the cool grey, but I'm going to come in now with the warmer greys to finish his wing and also to colour his legs. So this is a W3. The legs of the little wren are going to be warm shades of grey. So I'm just going to base them in with the W3. Using the tip, because these are very tiny little legs. So using the tip of the marker just to add that colour. And then I'm going to switch to my W6. This is the darkest of the greys that I'm using. And I'm going to add that to the shadowy places. So where the legs come up under the belly, under the sort of I'm sure it's not his ankle, but the ankle area here and there at the back of the leg. And this is to create that contrast and to also add some shape. This is back to the W3, that lightest color, and this is just to blend everything together. Yeah. All right, so now over to his wing. This is the W3 again. So I'm going to shape those feathers. And then I'm going to add those darker colors. Now switching to the W6 under the feathers. So the feathers are layered kind of like tiles as they come down the bird. So underneath the feathers above will be dark. There's some little feathers here, so it'll be dark underneath those. And that end of the feather here will be the lightest part. Okay, so just stroking in a couple of lines there at the end. And then the W5, we're going to smooth that blend toward the end of the feather. And also add some more lines. W4. And then back in with the W3, and that will blend it all together. Still using those nice short little lines with the markers. And then we're going to work on the tail. So I have these blues chosen. Now they're B99, 97, 95 and 93. So I'm going to start on with the 93, even though this is mostly going to disappear because the tail is so dark. But we're going to work those colours in. So working all the way up or down the feathers. Doesn't matter if you work from the bottom to the top or vice versa. Just make sure that you follow the direction of the feathers. You don't want to work crossways. And then we want to add some smooth transitions between our colours. So into our darkest and our lightest. He's going to be darkest down here at the bottom of the tail. So we're not going to worry too much about separating the feathers down here. It's just going to be all dark. Then as we work out towards the end of the tail, we are going to start separating those feathers. So up beside that outside feather. And it's going to be darkest underneath those feathers. So it was 99, this is 97, and now I'm starting that smooth blend. Okay, so 95, and this will be the last colour. So I'll finish off with the 95, and that will be just smooth that blend of his tail. Right, tail done. Now the hood, there's a couple of different colours in the hood. So there's the lightest of the blues is here at the top of his head, his cheek, and right along the back of the neck there. I'm going to, or his little beak is blue as well, but I'm just going to colour the entire beak and hood of the bird with the lightest blue. Now you can just avoid his eye for the moment. And we'll talk a little bit about eyes when we colour that later. So again, you can see that I'm using those short strokes with my marker. Now even though it's not in the drawing, I'm going to allow my marker to leave little fuzzy edges around the bird so that that will indicate feathers. So where I come out on little flecks. Now they're tiny, tiny little marks that you can barely see, but it will still give the idea that those are feathers. Now I'm going to come in with my B95, and I'm going to concentrate now on those, on that top of the head, the cheek and the neck. And all I'm going to do is add a little bit of the 95, just to add a bit of layering. Again, I'm still following the shape of the bird, so the way that the feathers would be laid down, a little bit around the eyes, a little bit darker. And I'm thinking about the layering of the feathers. So they, as I said before, they layer one on top of the other, coming out from the eye, or the beak. And I'm going to go back to my 93 and just finish that shading. All right. So we might start with we'll start with the 99, which is the darkest of the colours. I'm going to add a little bit of the 99 just around the bottom of his beak and into the darker areas, so around the bottom of his chest and where those feathers meet the breast. Again, little flicking strokes. Now remember that the lines of feathers won't be straight. Don't try and make a straight line between these different areas, so between the wing and the part above it. You don't want little straight lines because feathers don't form straight lines. So we're just laying in that dark colour. You can layer this sort of in different ways if you want to. So I might add just a little bit of darkness here and a little bit more under the eye, a little bit more around the beak. You can pretty much have an artistic license on this part. Wherever you really want to lay that darkest colour is up to you. Alright, so now I'm coming down to the B97. I'm not going to get any lighter than the B97 in these areas because I want those to be really dark blue. Now the eye, for any living thing, any animal or human, whatever you've got, is really the most important part of an image because it's where humans always look. We're always we always start by looking at the eye of a creature. So I have now a black and a white pen. I'm going to colour the entire eye with the 97, the B97, and then I'm going to add in a shaped line around the outside. It's going to be sort of a little bit broken. I'm not going to fuss too much. I don't know if you can even see that, but I've broken that up with a pen, and then I'm going to paint in the round pupil, nice and dark. You want that nice and black. All right, so a round pupil. But what really brings this to life is the white. So the white represents the liquid in the eye, the moisture in the eye. Once you put in this little bit of shine, it brings the creature to life. So all of a sudden it's come to life. You can see that's the eye and that's where it's looking at us. And that pretty much is the end of our marker stage. So we've coloured the entire image. It's ready to go. Now what we're going to do is bring in some of those details with our coloured pencils. I have all my coloured pencils here that I'm going to be using. It's not terribly many. The blues, the dark blue and the vibrant blue are really to add some more texture into the bird and to separate some of the spaces. Then I have a dark brown for shaping, a dark brown, a black and a French grey for shaping and helping to deepen some of these colours for more dimension and depth. Have your sharpener handy as well. I like to really work with a nice sharp pencil. Some people prefer just to rub the pencil on their paper to make the sharp tips. I like to have a sharpener. That's up to you. And all I'm going to do now, we're not going to be recoloring the whole image. All I'm going to be doing is using the pencils to stroke in some lines. So this is all about texture, adding texture back in to my little bird. So I'm going to go a little bit beyond where my marker is. And my lines are not going to be touching each other. They're going to be a little bit apart so that we get that sort of hairy, feathery look to the bird. Especially here over the wing. So we want that to blend in kind of a little bit more. So we're going to bring those together and around the bird's little head. So keep your pencil sharp. Again, we're working away from that beak. And we're helping to create that beautiful texture and movement and give the idea that what we're seeing are feathers. Alright, so stroke in all those little lines. This is the darker blue. So this is a PC 901. indigo blue. And I'm just going to finish right up along the head there. Short strokes. You don't need really long ones because the feathers, there's not a feather that comes from the beak all the way to the back of the head. They're really small feathers on these little birds. So don't do big long lines. You just want little short ones. And then for the rest of the bird, I'm going to use this beautiful bright vibrant blue. This is PC 903. It's called True Blue. And I'm going to just do the same thing, making sure that those lines don't actually touch each other. They're close, but they're not touching because I want the texture. You can see it's not taking me very long, but that it's actually boosting that blue of that bird. Same here around the head, following the shape of the bird and leaving that nice fuzzy edge as you come around the top. Okay, so all we've done is really increase that texture. I think you can see that it's a lot more textured now with the pencil than it was just with the marker. Now I'm going to use some of the sepia, which is PC 948. I'm going to use this just to add a little bit of shading on the bird, just here under his wings and under this section here. Now these aren't feathers that I'm adding now. This is a bit of shading. So I'm not doing the short sharp strokes. I'm doing a lot of pressure just under the wing, and then as I work down I'm going to release that pressure so that it's a shadow. Same up here, and then I'm going to switch to the black. Now be very careful with the black because it does come out, does come off very easily. I'm just going to add a little bit of shadow here under his wing. Now I'm barely touching and you can see how dark that already is. So just take that gently. Okay, same with these fuzz around his butt. Just gently until you're happy with it. And we need a little bit of this sepia again on the tops of his legs. Just to add a little bit of shadow. Okay, right. So the bird is pretty much done. I'm happy with that. If I wanted to, I could have added a little bit of white here and there, maybe in his breast, but I'm quite happy with the way he looks, so I'm going to leave it at that. What I'm going to work on next is the branch itself. So adding a little bit of highlights and a little bit of shade here and there along the branch. This is the PC 1069, the 20% French grey. All I'm going to do is add, just coming down the very center here and there of the branch, I'm going to add a little bit of this grey. And this is kind of like a highlight. And what it will do is pick up the center. So it will create that shape that what we're looking at is a rounded branch. All right, so I'm not going to do it everywhere, just sort of on the thicker areas. Some parts will be highlighted a little bit more than others, and that's to give the impression again that the branch is not uniform in shape. So if we add a little bit of highlight here and there, those highlighted areas are going to, as you know, come forward. So that's the push and pull, whereas the darker areas will recede. Okay, so we can see how just by adding that highlight here on this fork, I've brought that forward. Now I wouldn't want to do that behind the little bird's feet, for example, because I don't want them to pull forward. What I do want to do is I want to bring this branch here. I want this to be the main part of the branch. So I'm going to add the highlight just down that section, and all that does is push these branches off to the side, pushes them backwards. It makes it look like they're not the main part of the branch, which they're not. Same down here. This, I'm going to make this little junction here a bit brighter so that you can see that a little bit more. Okay, and in the opposite way, I'm going to use the sepia and the black just to push back some of those other branches. So I'm going to push them backwards using that grey. using the sepia, I beg your pardon. Right, so pushing those all the way back with my pencil. In behind the bird's tail. Now under the feet, I'm going to start with the black. So this will help to really add that detail to the feet. If we just, I'm not colouring the bird itself, I'm actually colouring on the branch, but I'm adding some shading under those little claws so that it looks like the bird is gripping that branch. You can see immediately, see the difference between the 2 feet there? And that's just because I've added a little tiny bit of black. I'll soften that with a little bit of sepia. But you can see the difference between those 2 feet. Even though I haven't added any extra colour to this foot, just by adding that colour to the branch has really made a big difference. And that's the push and pull. So because the foot is so much lighter and the branch is so much darker, it's made that contrast that we need. So let's do it to this little foot here. Again, we're colouring the branch, not the foot. So putting in some of that darkness. And that helps to lift that foot. Okay, so we've grounded our bird. He's right here now sitting on that branch. By adding that shadow, we've created the relationship between the bird's feet and the branch. There we go. So what a difference. All right, let's focus now on our gum nuts. So they're the ones that need a little bit of work. Let's focus here on this one. This is the one that has that opening that we can see. So that's going to be really dark. I've got my black. Making that really dark, and I'm going to release that pressure as I come forward toward the opening, and it's almost gone. All right. Same with the sepia, just a little bit of sepia. Now we don't want that one to be too dark because it's at the front, but we do want the ones behind it to recede a little bit, especially these 2 back here. So we're going to push them back with the darker colour. Starting off nice and dark, and then as we move away, make it softer and softer so that it becomes a nice blend. All right, and you can see how that separates the gum nuts just by adding that shadow. So we've brought that one, we've pushed that one back even further. Now what we're going to do is bring this one forward with a little bit of the French grey. So if I boost that highlight here in the centre, so make sure you feather that colour outward. Lighter and lighter pressure as you move away from that, the top of the highlight, which is in here in the centre part. So darkest here, more pressure here, and then as you move out, softer and softer. Now I'm going to go through and do that to each of the gum nuts, and I'm going to use the black and the sepia to push them backwards where they need to be pushed backwards. But before I do that, I just want to show you that you can add a little bit of these blues in as well. So these are the blues that are in my bird. Gently add them into the darker areas. So where it's nice and dark, start in the darker area and then work into the light. Now this is kind of just a highlight color here and there. You don't want it to take over. You just want to add just a hint here and there. So on a couple of the gum nuts, particularly on the leaves, because the leaves of gum trees, as we discussed before, have a lot of different colors in them. So you can add in some of the beautiful blues. You don't need to do it to every every leaf if you don't want to. You don't need to do it all if you don't want to, but just adding a little bit will actually pull the picture together, and so it will look more coordinated. I'm just going to add a nice light touch here and there. And the same again with that French grey. So this is more about boosting the highlights. The French grey is a nice light colour. It's a neutral colour. Well, it's a bit on the warm side. So it's not as stark as white, but it's still going to help you boost those highlights. So you can see how that's really quite light there. So anywhere where the leaf comes forward, you can boost that highlight if you want to. So if you want to add a little bit of the French grey, that's fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go around and add the black and the sepia to my gumnut clusters, and also to some of the leaves where they're pushed behind. Add in some of the blue, and then we'll be ready to go. Alright, so we're almost finished darkening up the different areas of our image. And this goes back to what we talked about in those earlier videos about colouring for shape rather than the light source or the directionality of the light. So what we've done is use those push and pull of colour to shape our objects, to shape the rounded gum nuts, to shape the leaves, but also to create that depth. So to push certain elements of our picture backward and to bring other elements forward. So that's what it means to use push and pull of colour, the darks and the lights of colour, to shape and add dimension and depth to your image. So you should just be about finished now. You can add some finishing touches. You can even do in a background if you want to, depending on what, of course, you're using the image for. But other than that, we're just about done. So that's your image. We have all our marker laid down. We have all our pencil laid down over the top. I hope you enjoyed doing that with me. Use those same techniques for any of the images that you want to colour. It's all about using colour and dark and light to shape those objects and get them lifted up off your page. Don't forget also the grounding, which we haven't really done in this picture, but that would be the background that you can include again later. Well, thank you for joining me for this 4-part video tutorial presentation on the basics of colouring. I hope you enjoyed each of the videos and learned a little bit along the way. If you have any questions or would like to get in touch with me about anything that you've learned over the course of this tutorial, then please send me an email or visit me on Facebook or even pop over to the blog. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.